All right, we're live.
Alrighty. G'day everyone. Welcome to the S&C Podcast. Yeah, we finally found a name. I am one of your hosts, Stefan, Carly. That's what the C is for. And then we've got Matt.
Yeah, I'm Matthew Score. It's part of what the S is for. It's also strength, but then let us know what you think of the name if you're listening to this. Steph thought of it the other day, and I like it. I think it's a good name, but curious to see what everybody else thinks.
Well, I think it encompasses everything, doesn't it? We got S&C, strength and conditioning, Score and Carly. I think it works really, really well. So what are we going to talk about today, Matt? We're going to focus on some ankle stuff. We had some people the other day that reached out and wanted us to talk a little bit more about ankle strength, ankle mobility, and how you can kind of get a little bit more from your ankles. And speaking from your own previous experience, I mean, for you, you've had some significant ankle injuries and have obviously overcome those ankle injuries. So what have you done and what have you found has been really, really helpful for you to be able to overcome those ankle injuries?
Yeah, so I think when I think of how I rehab my ankle and how I kind of look into working with other people and continuing to strengthen my ankles, there's two sets of three parts and they overlap. So for me, there's your lower leg muscles, your calf muscles and your tibialis and that such. And then there's the soft tissue in the ankles. So the actual, like your deltoid ligaments and everything that holds all the bones together. And then there's your feet and your toes. So you have to take care of each one of those three. And then there's kind of three stages of becoming healthy with each of those that I've kind of decided and been planning on making a video on this. But so I just primarily first thought called them mobility, strength, and ability. So for the calf, I mean, you have to have sufficient dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Like you have to be able to move your ankle sufficiently and inversion and eversion. And then the mobility with the actual ankle ligaments is kind of the same thing as the calf. They kind of bleed into each other, but still the ability to not be so tight that you can't invert or evert. And then with your toes and your feet, that's more of having the mobility to actually move your toes, like to have them actually function and not just be stuck together. So that would be the mobility part. And then strength, that's the most common thing with the lower leg muscles, like having strong gastroc soleus, anterior and posterior tibialis. They have to be strong, and they have to be strong before you move on too. And then same thing with the soft tissue in the ankles. You have to have resilient tissues, and we know you can grow ligaments and tendons and everything. So we want to kind of lay even more thickness on there, but maintain that mobility. So again, we call it a lot of strength through length, having the ability to withstand forces that aren't necessarily typical. So being able to withstand minor sprains and bad positions. And then in the feet, it's the ability to have the strength to build your arch and the strength of your toes to actually work and to kind of grab and feel the ground. And then you have ability, which is kind of taking the strength and putting it into a functional setting. So for the calves, I think of it as like pogo hops and lateral jumps and the ability to use that strength quickly and move. And then for the soft tissue and the ankle, it's more of being able to withstand those kind of lateral forces and not rupture and be able to do it quickly. So, excuse me. So the ability is kind of the ability to use the strength you have quickly and in a functional setting. And then it's kind of the same thing with the toes and the feet, being able to use the strength that you kind of built up and the ability to correct and flatten the arch and create the arch when it's necessary. And yeah, so that's kind of my
Yeah.
3, or you can make it 9-part ankle
Yeah.
bulletproofing.
So just to kind of like sum it up into one little thing, it's you've got the strength, then you've got the mobility, then you've got the ability. So you want the strength to be able to be strong in those ranges and become mobile in those ranges as well. And then you want to try and transfer that as well into whatever sport you're playing or whatever things that you're doing. So it's kind of like they all lead on to each other, and it's like almost like a massive circle sort of thing. You want to make sure that
Yeah.
things come back to the start again.
Yeah, I think you have to start a lot of times with the ankle. You have to start with the mobility first, though, rather than the strength, because a lot of people have toes that are here, and it's so difficult. And then if your ankle can't flex, you can't strengthen something that can't move. So to have the mobility to move into the correct positions almost has to come first. And there's an aspect of strength in that, but the first thing for me is getting functioning joints and toes and your feet and the ankle, if that makes sense. I don't know if you agree with
Yeah.
that, but that's kind of
Yeah.
what I've noticed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know that my ankles have definitely been probably one of the things that had led to my reconstructions, because with my ankle mobility, and in particular, like with my feet, you talk about your feet, then the soft tissue in your ankles, and then even you have a look at like the calves, the gastrocs, soleus, the tibs, and everything like that. Like I know that has definitely been one area of my body that has been lacking, and that is probably, I mean, I can't say for sure, but it's definitely probably, I think it definitely is one of the reasons why all that kind of force just went right into my knee, because I do have quite strong hips. I mean, got a strong ass, I think. And like my ankles I would never really roll ankles, or never really had the tendency to get injuries or tears within my ankles. But then it was like that weak point was my knees, and then yeah, I guess that's what happens. And even moving on from like the ankles, you go to your feet and your toes. And like we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, for as long as I can remember, like I've always had my feet kind of like just stuck together like this.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the functionality of your feet then. It's just like, well, you're just walking around on wooden stubs. You're like that what's his name, Pirate Steve from Family Guy, with just the wooden legs just walking around. Like that's what it feels like, because you don't have the functionality within your toes and your feet to be able to actually use them properly. What have you experienced in terms of ankle injuries though? Like there's probably, I assume that there has been a bit in terms of the injuries that you've sustained, but what's been the length of time that you've had out? What have the injuries been? Have they been predominantly soft tissue injuries? Have you ever had kind of like connective tissue injuries as well? Like what's it been for you, just so we can give the audience a little bit to kind of feed off of if they've experienced that sort of similar thing? And then what have you done to kind of work on that strength, work on that mobility, and then be able to apply it within the ability?
Yeah. And now that I'm thinking about it, I might have been saying soft tissue when I meant connective tissue in the
Yeah.
ankle.
Yeah.
I meant connective tissue. I said tendons and ligaments and connective tissue. Yeah. So for me, in my ankles, it was basically all connective tissue injuries. So I had a couple really big sprains, like grade 2, maybe. I don't think quite grade 3. I didn't have to have surgery, but some fairly heavy grade 2s, and then so many grade 1 sprains, both inversion and eversion on both of my feet, really. And then so I've had the major ones, I've had them be 4, 5, 6 months of rehab before they start
Wow.
feeling normal, is the wrong word, but that I could play again. But the real issues for me came in the form of tendinopathies, tendonitis, call it what you will, but the tendonitis, the recurring inflammation in some of the connective tissue, and then chronic sprains. So the last time, about a year or so ago, I went in and they gave me an MRI, and it was tendonitis, tendinopathy, tenosynovitis in my posterior tibial tendon. So the tendon that wraps around the underside of the ankle bone that helps build your arch, and then chronic grade 1 sprain. And basically all of the ligaments in my ankle. So basically they don't heal. Like they never healed. So it was chronically sprained. So it was always partially torn in all these different places throughout my ankle. And then the tendonitis, and that's just recently. I think I managed to heal the chronic sprains a while back, but the um, tendonitis is something that's just now healing. So that's been a year plus, and then so basically it's been a rolling 8-9 years of spraying, healing it, spraying, tendonitis, but this, that, and things are just now um, healing up. So that's ankles are a tough one because you have to walk on them. Like if you sprain your wrist, I mean, we know you don't want to immobilize it, but you can avoid any movement that's kind of too much for it. You can't not walk everywhere unless you want to be in a wheelchair on crutches, and that wasn't an option for me
Yeah.
because it
What's
wasn't so bad.
what's now you spoke about like mobility probably being the most important thing in terms of ankle, but then obviously you need that strength to be able to apply it as well. But what would be probably your go-to exercises for people to be able to do ankle strengthening exercises? Because I think that there's a little bit of like because it's not just the ankle that's moving when you're trying to apply it. Like there's so much else. So what is, from your point of view, would be one of or a couple of the best exercises that you've noticed have really, really helped gain that mobility? And then we could probably go towards like the strength side of it afterwards.
Yeah. So for the toes, anything that, and it depends on what level you're kind of at with the ability of your toes. So you're going to start with having to move your toes like yourself, like just grabbing them and moving around and shoving your fingers in there and spreading them apart, because you won't have the connection, the neurological connection to be able to move your toes actually a lot of times at the beginning. So anything that's manually moving your toes around is going to be really good at the beginning. And then after that, developing I like big toe exercises a lot. The other toes are good, but the big toe is the money maker. So anything that works your ability to, I think this is adduction with your big toe. So adduct your big toe, pick it up, put it down, squeeze it into the ground, anything like that to be able to develop um, just the ability to move your toes in the way they should is fantastic for everything up the chain. And then I really like for ankle mobility, I always give people the Patrick step and seated calf raises for developing range of motion in the ankle. I think those are two of the best ways to load that extra range and develop oh, excuse me, to develop that extra range and develop strength through it so that it kind of stays. And yeah, and then any kind of getting into bad positions with your ankle will kind of help to improve the mobility. And I know you've worked with that some. So what are your thoughts and experience on the bad positions?
I quite enjoy actually working through those ranges. Like I've been doing here, just constantly standing and kind of rolling from side to side, because like for me, I know that there's one side that is definitely a little bit tighter than the other side. And whether that's because of previous injury that I haven't addressed or what, I'm not too sure. But for me, I actually quite enjoy going into those positions that are unsafe or that cause damage or that cause injury. And that actually, it makes me feel more comfortable, not just with my ankles, but actually higher up the chain as well. But also for me, like I've spoken about, is my feet have just been wrecked from playing football for such a long period of time. And I actually had a chat with Benji from FAE, and we're talking about this a little while ago about how it's like, it's hard to actually create change within your feet because you spend so much time, especially if they've been warped for, like, for me, 20 years being in soccer boots. It's a long time. If they've been warped that way, it's probably going to take longer than 20 years to actually change that position of them. I spent forever in my football boots, and it's not going to happen straight away. And you kind of almost have to be careful as well that you don't go too crazy straight out the blocks, because like you said before, you're always using your feet. You're never not using your feet unless you want to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, which again is not an option for me, or walking on crutches or whatever it is. Like, you're always using your feet. So that's probably a good time as well to actually practice that. Now, whether that's through barefoot shoes or actually walking around barefoot or doing those sort of exercises, those foot exercises, then potentially like you can work a little bit more. But I think that for me, it's been like toe exercises are a big thing. And I really like toe exercises and ankle exercises, like just moving side to side, coming in and out, even just coming onto my toes, trying to practice and these are the reasons why I can't actually get into particular positions. Like, I don't think it's my knees. I think it's my toes that are stopping me from getting into those positions. Like, you think about a sissy squat coming down, it's because I can't load up on my big toes that I can't come back in. It's not the strength in my quads or my knees or whatever it is. Like, it is that's the reason why I can't get down. And so just practicing with that ability to be able to load up my toes more, in particular my big toes, so then that way I can actually apply it better. Because I think that I believe anyway, that it's not just one sole thing, the reason why it's not working out. For me, I don't think it's just my big toes or just my ankles or just my knees or whatever, but there's that much from your ankle, there's probably that much from my big, or that much from my big toe, then there's maybe that much from my knee. And so it's like, well, if I can tap into a little bit more of the big toe, then I'm probably going to be able to go down a little bit lower with my squat or my sissy squat, so then I can load up on my toes a little bit more. So it's interesting because you kind of go through this whole thing, and it's never really just one thing. Like, it wasn't just one thing that sort of caused me to have these reconstructions. It was a lot of things, I think, but ultimately it's probably one thing more so than everything else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So one of the things that actually for me was one of the biggest difference makers was I was fortunate enough to be able to spend almost my entire day without shoes on. And if I was wearing shoes, to wear barefoot shoes. Spending months like that, like all of my workouts were barefoot, like pushing the sled on the turf, squatting, split squats, whatever, like no shoes on around the house, no shoes. That helped me to kind of get my toes back to where they should be quicker. And you can kind of condense that if you into exercises more. So exercises are more potent in their effect, but there's only so many you can do. And just walking around barefoot doesn't do that much for just a little bit of time. But if you do it for 8 or 10 hours a day, it compounds and can make quite a difference.
Yeah.
But so one interesting thing, I think I have a little bit of a different viewpoint than a lot of people on the topic of cleats and tight shoes, performance shoes, I guess you could call them. So I always tell people, it's different if you're a coach and you're wearing cleats for 8 or 10 hours a day on the field with teams. But if you're a player and you're only in your boots for 2 hours, 5 days a week, just wear what you like wearing, and then spend the time afterwards to reverse it. So if you wear your shoes that are specifically made for performance, like there is something to be said for having shoes that are tight and locked down and you don't slip and you have that feel for the ball that is going to be exactly the same every time because your feet don't move. There's something to be said for that. And I myself wouldn't, even if there were wide toe box cleats, I don't think I would wear them. I'd stick with my too tight, too narrow cleats just for the performance aspect. The caveat to that is you have to put in the work afterwards to undo the issues you just caused there. So if you're barefoot shoes, 8 hours a day, you go to training, you spend 2 hours in your boots, you come home, you do a couple toe mobility exercises, you get your fingers in between your toes, you spread them out, do a couple arch builders. In my mind, there's a negligible impact that 2 hours had on the rest of your time on your feet, and had a for me would be a noticeable benefit in your ability to compete during that time frame. That makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely notice that as well. Like I played a game on the weekend for the first time in 9 months. It was the Legends game. I don't know how to take that. Like I don't think I'm that much of a legend, but I get put into a bracket of people who are, almost twice my age. but it was like you get back onto the pitch, and I mean we played on turf as well. And the next day, I only played half an hour, but it was half an hour of work that I haven't done in a long time, and my feet, like even today, under the soles of my feet, just on fire. Like everything is just really, really sore on the soles and on the bottom of my feet. And I mean, I don't wear. I'm more a old school kind of guy, goes for the Pumas, the
I saw your
leather.
cleats. Those are old school.
Diego Maradona-esque. I don't tend
Yeah.
to go for. I mean, I used to wear those ones that were super, super tight, but then later on, with the last year or two of my career, it was just like comfort is what's going to get me through the rest of the time that I'm playing, because for me, it's not worth that feeling of like that sore and stiff and tightness that I get with my feet, because my feet have just been destroyed, like constantly destroyed. And the Pumas, they're actually the leather that's on Pumas, the Puma Kings, like they are really. We should put a little photo up in the afterwards. We'll put a
Yeah.
photo up of the boots that I've actually got. But the leather is just super, super soft. Now I can't imagine. And it might be that like from actually playing in those super soft boots, my foot had to move around a little bit more on the boots. So maybe that's why my feet were exposed to a little bit more. And had they been in tighter boots, maybe I wouldn't have that sensation of that workout underneath the soles of my feet. So it's kind of like, well, you don't really know until you know. But it's just interesting having not played for a while and how I'm feeling now. And you kind of have to condition. That's what conditioning is all about too. Like you have to
Yeah.
condition yourself so that way you know. And for me, it's probably a Legends game every 5 years, but it's not going to be every week or every year, that's for sure. Because my or who knows, we don't know, but my body is definitely and I think that's also from the turf as well, because I've never been a fan of turf. And that can be another conversation that we have, where like for you in America, you guys have had turf. That's all you've played on is turf, and you
Yeah.
prefer
All my
turf,
life.
don't you? Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it's like we've played on turf for maybe 4 years. And I want to say every year at the club that I've been at, we've had probably one ACL in the senior team rupture. That's including myself. So including myself, and then there's 3 other players as well, whether it's ACL or even medial tears, like in grade 3 tears too.
Yeah.
It'd be 4+, definitely 4+.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To circle back a little bit, I have had that same feeling of the kind of burning, like you're rubbing it.
Yeah.
But that was when I played basketball in my Vivos, the barefoot shoes, and I'm also an idiot. I didn't tie them, but I was like rubbing around and sliding the
Yeah.
whole time, and it didn't hinder my ability to be athletic, really. But afterwards, I was like, oh, my feet are raw right now from
Yeah.
sliding around just a little bit more than you would normally. And that's
Exactly.
the same reason I wouldn't tell a basketball player to wear barefoot shoes when they're playing, because basketball shoes are built for a reason. Soccer boots are built for a reason. I'm sure baseball cleats are built for a reason. Everything's built for a reason, and it's to forget everything else and make you perform at your highest ability for 48, 60, 90, however long your game is. A couple hours if it's baseball, a few days if it's
Yeah.
cricket.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because my first ever ACL was actually because of my boots. So as I was running, because my boots were a little bit bigger and the leather in them had stretched a lot, there was a lot of wiggle room in my boots.
Yeah.
And so when I actually went to go plant and I went to go turn, my foot or my boot got caught in the grass and this was back playing on grass too,
Yeah.
didn't move, but my foot slid in the boot, but then my knee kept going. And because I didn't have that extra buffer to be able to, or that tightness and stiffness in the boot as well, it was just like, that was it. It was just doomed. And the force just found that point and bang, that was it. So
Yeah.
I tend to agree with the the high impact sort of stuff, those games, those high impact games, it's almost like if you want to do barefoot shoes, go for it. But I think you kind of have to go like gradually introduce the shoes bit by bit by bit. But
Yeah.
it's almost like you have to do it enough to be able to get enough back, so you have to make sure that you're not doing too much, but then you don't want to do too little that you're not getting maximum results. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would much rather you wear barefoot shoes for the other 22 hours of a day versus deciding, oh, I'm going to be a basketball player and wear barefoot shoes for my 2-hour training. It's like, well,
Yeah.
and then you just wear normal shoes for the rest of the 22 hours a day. It's like you are sacrificing performance, and like you're stepping over dollar bills to pick up pennies, is I think Stan Efferding's old, or I don't know who said that, but that's where I heard. Yeah. So you're trying to change something that doesn't necessarily, and maybe there is the aspect of you're getting more in that time period, so you're getting a little bit more effect out of it. But
Yeah.
like maybe if you're a basketball player, you can wear your barefoot shoes and shoot around and in like your technical kind of workouts and when you're getting shots up. But then when it gets to a live game, you switch over, and then you can still kind of get it from your kind of skill-based work where you're not so worried about having that extra padding and having the lockdown. It's an interesting debate, that is.
Yeah, maybe that's for another podcast. That one, we should get someone on who has completely different views. I think that would be a good idea to really try and because I think that's important too. You want to have these conversations with people because we have very similar views. And so if you're watching this and you'd like to jump on the podcast, be our guest, like come on, spend half an hour, we'll just chat about some sort of stuff and what you find, because our views are going to be completely different to somebody else's views. And it would be really, really interesting to actually have those conversations. It's not like it's an emotional lash out or anything like that, but everyone's going to have different experiences. People have similar experiences. So I think it's important that we get like a broad kind of feel for how different people experience things, because there could be some people in our similar position, and then there's other people that are like, man, you guys like, nah, I completely disagree. This is what's worked for me. And that's what's important too, because not everyone is like us and not everyone is like them, and everybody is like, there's everywhere in between too. So I think that if you watch this podcast, you'd like to jump on, you got some different views, let us know, be our guest.
Let's hear it. It is good to get other people's perspectives in, because sometimes you can get the ATG echo chamber, and we're like, somebody says it and we're like, yeah, and then and everybody starts agreeing, and you're like, there's no way this is wrong. And it's usually it isn't wrong. Like there's very, very rarely is it, at least in my view, but people that are in ATG aren't going to tend to be the people that have polar opposite views and kind of challenge things, really.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, that's half an hour. You got anything else to add, Matty?
Thanks for listening.
Where can they find you, Matt?
On Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, wherever, at Score Performance, SKAAR Performance. What about you?
I am on TikTok and Instagram at Coach Carly with 3 I's still, and then the YouTube at just Coach Carly, single I. So we'd love to hear from you guys as well. If you genuinely enjoy what we're putting out there, we'd love to hear what else you'd like to hear. And if you don't, well, that's okay as well. It's we'd love to hear feedback. We'd love to hear feedback either way. So whatever it is that you would like to hear, or maybe don't want to hear so much of, maybe, I don't know what it could be, but whatever it is, let us know in the comments or just reach out to us on Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. This is the S&C Podcast. I've been wanting to do that for the last half an hour.
And let us know what you think of the name.
Definitely let us know.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.